Well, welcome back to the Work Culture Podcast. We're glad you're here tuning in. And today we've got Joe Womack. He is a partner in advisors and placement. And he'll tell you a little bit of what that means. But he's also entrepreneured many times before. He's presidented and CEO'd and been on boards and all of that. Really cool dude. And we have a lot of great things to talk about. But Joe, let me pass it to you before we dive in. Give us just a high-level intro. Who are you and how did you get here?
Thanks, Jason. I've spent a couple of years in corporate life, a couple of decades, a couple of years in corporate life. I had a really fun run in the 90s with Sun Microsystems, introducing the internet technology. And sitting here right now, I see some of the things that have all come to fruition in what's possible on the internet. A couple of decades also as an entrepreneur, healthcare, construction space, obviously technology background, those kind of things. Right now, I'm a project that's near and dear to my heart, kind of a calling, is the idea of placement. We're a sandwich generation. 10,000 people a day are turning 65 in this country. And what the outcome is for an ideal place when people can no longer live at home is a real challenge for so many, not just our seniors and the elders, but the families that have full-time lives and yet have to help figure out whether it's independent living, assisted living, memory care. It takes a special effort to really help those folks find the optimal solution that's uniquely tailored for each of them. And so I'm really excited about this venture that we've launched about 5 years ago and brought to Texas this year.
Yeah, wow. I'm sure we'll hear a little more about that. I'm excited. You've done a lot of different things, and I want to get into it, but I have to follow my own instructions. And we ask every guest the same first question. And that is, Joe, what is a mistake that you've made in leadership that you'll never forget?
There's a list. The one that I have tried to learn from a couple of times is the idea that when you see talent and you're in growth-minded companies, it's easy to want to promote people to where you think they can be, whether they want to be there or not. And I learned that the first time at about 35 years old. And I've had to learn it a few other times. I do think that stretching people and allowing them to have an opportunity and grow is healthy for the culture. But sometimes you can put people in an untenable place. So really, I'm trying to still learn and do a better job of giving people that upside to grow and be all they can be, but also not put them in a situation where they just didn't really have a chance in the promotion or the responsibilities at that moment.
Yeah, a lot of times the most common place I see this is, as an example, there's a great salesperson, so we make them a sales leader, and they just bomb. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Something in that realm?
It's a classic. The skills for a sales manager, sales leader are very different. And to be a good sales rep, typically you have some control freak in you for sure. And then a lot of times when people become a sales leader, it's hard to let go of that and trust that that team of 5 being 80% as effective, if you let them grow and develop and coach where needed and stay out of the way where needed, will be a lot more effective than continuing with the same activities and attributes that made you a great individual contributor.
Yeah, man, totally agree. What are some other examples, or if any come to mind?
Well, I've taken people that weren't in sales and moved them because they had the capability, whether a marketing background or operations background or technical background. And sometimes those folks make the best salespeople because they have that content approach to the process. But I think sometimes that I've put people into situations where it was too big of a stretch. And oftentimes it's at the director or vice president level where you move somebody where they could have taken another step. I was blessed early on to get all that I wanted, all that I could eat and have fast growth track. But there are people may have a season in their life. They may be capable of being a vice president of sales, but at that season in their life, the organization needs to give them grace to say, okay, it doesn't mean you're not doing it now. You can't do it forever. You're taking care of your parents, whatever. And so just trying to be sensitive to what is the right thing for that individual in a balance with the organization's needs while still having the healthy culture of upward mobility.
Yeah. I imagine you have successfully seen people move up into roles as well, where you were excited and you saw the hidden potential in someone, put them in a new role, and then they really shined.
Well, we an example right here. She's just recently retired from Dell. Cheryl Cook was a person that I worked with who we kind of fast tracked her after we got her from another computer company. And one of the last things I did there was we promoted her to vice president, and she just hasn't missed a beat. And so those are the victories that you say, wow, what if we had held them back? What if we had said there are people more senior, there are people who've been here longer, there are people more politically connected, all those kinds of things. And really, for a healthy growth organization where every member of the team can feel like they have really a chance in a meritocracy, you've got to allow those things to happen. And certainly, if your company's successful, you've made those decisions more often than not right, but it still hurts you when somebody leaves the organization because you put too much on their plate or gave them a responsibility that maybe needed another half step to get there.
Yeah, I love how you just put that. Yeah. So the meat and potatoes that we wanted to get into, you and I got a chance to actually, meet up and have a lunch before we decided to podcast, which is a rare opportunity. And what came to light was that you've been in so many different positions at massively different sized companies, right? I mean, Sun Microsystems, obviously huge. You've also been in the entrepreneur role. You're also now in basically a startup, right? And so I want to hear from you, and our audience wants to hear from you. What are the common threads that you've seen as it relates to culture that have to be in place no matter what size the company? And I think we talked about this, but just more context for the listeners. So many people are like, okay, I've heard that culture eats strategy for breakfast, but you don't understand. My company is different. All right, we need systems, whatever. I don't really think we need to focus on culture because we're small or we're big or we're or we're Fortune 50. So we don't. It's a lost cause. Might as well not even think about it. What would you say are these common threads?
Jason, I think that a key when you get into a culture conversation is authenticity. And one of the things that we talk about is the aspirational culture versus the actual culture. So what I've seen, if you go back to Sun Microsystems that you mentioned, Scott McNeely, Sun's on the golf tour now, Maverick. But you look at Scott, what led to a 40,000 employee company that mostly sang out of the same hymnal and rolling out the internet. Scott defined the culture. He was very competitive, captain of the Harvard golf team, but he simply said, kick butt and have fun. So in 4 words, he defined a culture that really represented who he was, how authentic. Here's a guy, CEO of a major company. He's fighting for ice time in San Jose at 2 a.m, right? While raising a family. So I think if a culture is really what the culture is, and that comes from the values, which comes from the founding and the leadership team typically. So the culture actually has to really represent the values as lived out by the leadership team every day. I've been in so many situations in all different size companies, Jason, where we talk about the culture, but it's aspirational. Yeah. It's not what the true culture is.
Yeah. I've been in situations where, the culture was super important to me. My role as president of Champion is an example where, from leadership down, culture was super important. But it took me probably 4 years to get the original founder and CEO bought into that. Have you seen that at play? Obviously, at Sun, it was top down from the very, very top. What is the impact in your mind when that very top CEO or founder is not bought in?
I think that it's like anything in change management. It's very difficult. You see it in churches. The pews are not going to rise above the pulpit. So what you were able to accomplish there, that's a credit to you, because it's very, very difficult if you don't have a burning bridge situation. And that goes back to good to great, right? If things are going well, then changing the culture or articulating the need to transform are very, very difficult. And quite frankly, in high-tech companies, which is where I started my career, it's no different. People think, oh, high tech, of course you know you got to change. Of course you go to bed knowing somebody in some other part of the world invented something to put you out of business. But culture and DNA, my experience has been that the DNA of an organization is very, very hard to change at the cellular level. And so what I see is the work done to get the leadership team bought in is really, really important if you're really going to try to change a culture.
Yeah. So if you're at an organization where culture hadn't been a focus and you're trying to bring it into the fold, that's no small task. And you can't just, hey, look, here are our new core values, and put up posters and expect that culture to permeate and actually take root. Like what you're saying is it takes a lot of effort and intentionality from all levels of leadership. Yeah.
Absolutely. And really, it's so important. And I think what I love about the work you've done with Aptive Index is that you've got to hire to culture the best that you can. And so if you have a clearly articulated culture and it's authentic, it doesn't do any good to hire somebody that's a rock star and then it's hard enough because you never know as an employee what you're getting into. You never know as a hiring organization what you're hiring. You don't know people. We're all different. We all have different things going on. We're at different stages of our journeys. So it's very, very difficult to guess what that's going to be until you're there a quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters. So to the extent that you can really define your culture, your authentic culture, and then interview to that, you can mitigate some of that. But that goes back to, is the culture defined? Is it defined at a high level? Is it the senior leadership team? True culture they're willing to stand behind and be a part of.
Yeah. And so then fast forwarding after you're about 20 years at Sun, right? When you're in obviously much smaller company, but still focusing on that, what are some of the key aspects of culture that you brought with you?
It was 58 quarters at Sun, but who's counting? We to the day, we find in smaller companies, a lot of times the culture can be aligned or there can be some cultural norms. So for instance, construction. I've learned in my construction ventures, whether it be the fence company or the fireplace company, anything I've done in construction, it's had a historically macho culture. It's a doer culture. It's we got to get out there and get it done, and maybe the weather's not cooperating, et cetera. So it can require a hardy culture. And so sometimes a particular industry can shape culture, and you've got to be cognizant of that. If you want to have a balanced, more diverse, which most all of us by now believe in, diverse teams is really important for problem solving, not for a social experiment, but really for problem solving.
Diversity of thought.
You need that diversity of thought. You need that diversity of experiences and approaches. And so industry like construction, I've found that we had to work at a little bit harder to say, what are the common themes here? We're not all 6'4" and can lift a steel beam, but we've all got to play our role to get this done. So I think the idea that you're aware of the cultural norms in your industry, in your company, and the times you're in.
Sometimes trying to break a mold too much can work against you. Have you tried anything from the larger company that you thought was going to work in a smaller company and then it totally didn't work?
Way too many of those. way too many of those. I'll get an example again on over promoting people in a smaller company or overpaying them, quite frankly. When you come from a larger corporation, terrific benefits, all those kind of things, just because you try to bring some of that in terms of compensation, in terms of, we had a company with 100% healthcare, way out of the norm of our peers. And, that doesn't make somebody suddenly 20% more productive. So then you end up with a gap of what the expectations are that you'll, by getting paid more, want to take a call after hours, or take that builder that wants to call you at 6:00 on Saturday night or whatever, because they're at a real pinch point in their project, et cetera. So I think really recognizing that a company starting up, and that's something that after I left corporate life, I realize now that those small businesses, those 4 million small businesses, are really the backbone of our economy, and they're really that culture, which is often very unique in a small company, but also has the upside to grow and change and evolve and have higher growth rates quickly. That's really got to take as much attention and vetting as the larger company that's often more established and more like trying to turn an aircraft carrier than what we can do in these small companies.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. Tell me a little more about you. You're at the fireplace warehouse, right, for almost 10 years?
Just sold it 119 months. Who's counting?
Yeah, 58 quarters, 119 months.
Yes, sir.
What's it like to step away from that? And this isn't as much of a culture conversation. This is more of a personal conversation. Like stepping away from that, has there been any shift or loss of purpose, identity, anything of that nature that you've experienced?
Well, I've been fortunate and blessed that there's a lot of different opportunities in the world. We live in the greatest country. We live at a very exciting time. I think about what's going on with AI. You'll probably use this with our podcast, but I look at what's happening with technology now versus when I got into technology 35 years ago. And it's very exciting. A lot of similarities for our young people, a lot of similarities for our future and what it can be, what we can do to make this a better planet and more fulfilling for all of us knuckleheads that are wandering around on our soul journeys. What I try to focus on is it's instructive to look in the rearview mirror. There are certainly things that we need to do to learn and be better every day. And if we're going to do James Clear and try to be 1% better every day, that rearview mirror is helpful, but the windshield is so much larger. And that's what we've got to do, look forward to. So I feel really blessed that I had a couple of decades in corporate life, being very missional. Obviously, the internet wasn't everything we thought it would be. We thought we could take the power from the publisher to the author, and in large measure that happened. The democratizing of China, we could argue that didn't happen quite as much as was envisioned with Java's introduction in 1995. As I've gotten to be in the smaller entrepreneurial companies, I find that's really exciting because you're changing lives more. And a lot of times it's people who didn't have everything right. They weren't the star athlete. They weren't the person that all the major corporations want to hire because they did fabulous in college and all that stuff. I find in smaller companies, there's a lot of people who've been nicked up, had a lot of challenges, and seeing those people get to grow and develop and have opportunities that really sometimes have been beat down and didn't believe they had. You can do a lot of those things and take chances and bet on people in smaller companies. That's exciting. For me right now, at my stage in my career, one of the projects, as we talked about, that I'm really excited about is advisors in placement. It's just a challenging time for all of us. We're living longer. That's a good thing. But we're also having a lot more challenges with our senior adults who need guidance, and as much the families who this is very challenging. We have a client we're working with right now. Mother-in-law's lived there for 21 years in the house, and it's extraordinarily difficult to think about how do we make that separation, and what's a permanent good answer, but still have all the love, et cetera. So I think that I've been really blessed with health and opportunities, a great network, great friends. And so I'm just somebody who loves opportunity and loves growth and loves to see where we can bring work and our personal lives into balance. I never really bought into the idea that you've got to separate work and life balance. You've got to integrate those. And Jason, if somebody's got a kindergarten graduation at 10 o'clock on Thursday, it's not up to the company to judge if that's more important than a college graduation, right? It's important to accommodate that if we can. Life is being lived even while we spend most of our time in the workplace.
That's an interesting take. So, we talk about work-life balance, and it's usually from the perspective of the worker saying, I need more balance. And so there has to be a separation between work and life. You're saying it almost from the flip side, like it is the responsibility of the organization to give that person balance. Like these shouldn't be separate conversations. If somebody needs an hour or 2 hour break to be with their kid or whatever, anything that it might be, it shouldn't be up to the organization to decide whether or not that's meaningful to that individual person. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And that's the accommodation that we need to make with people who are being productive. And I think if you look at our world today, with the communication, it's information overload. It's stimulus overload. And I look at it, if people cannot be distracted at work because they know that you're going to accommodate that thing that came up that wasn't planned at 2:30 with the family, with something else that you know about. Like when I started, you might not know about that. You might know the family situation that happened at 10 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. So you were productive. Wonderful. That's not today's world. So if today we don't look at that integration and we don't look at having a culture that's accommodating, again, in return for productivity, then I think we miss it. It's a 24/7 world in many ways, in many industries. And we've got to recognize that means there's got to be a good contract between the employer and the employee on how we're going to integrate and work together to the best that we can,
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a value exchange, and both parties have to determine, am I getting enough value from this exchange? And having that integration is a really important piece of that.
Absolutely. That's something that's evolved for me over time. And another thing that I've seen, Jason, is when I got into business, it was all about your IQ. We interviewed, we looked at, is that somebody smart enough? And we got to a place where in the 90s, everything was about EQ. What's your emotional quotient? I think the book came out. I learned everything I need to know about getting along with others in kindergarten or whatever it was. Who moved my cheese, all those things. And now we've moved to a world where it's about your AQ. There's a great TED talk on your adaptability index. And so I think both as the organization trying to team and move in an ever-changing by the hour world and be productive and be effective. And it's a global competition these days. And then the employee being able to be part of that and moving in that adaptation. I think the winning cultures are going to accommodate for that and recognize that it's really not even EQ as much anymore, although that's so important for good culture and good team, growth-minded team. But I think the adaptability and helping people with the idea that things are going to change and that's okay. It's unsettling, but it also can lead to opportunity.
I'll jump on a quick little soapbox, even though we're running out of time, because you talk about that evolution of IQ, EQ, AQ, and whatever the next Q is. But never has it been skills and experience. What does someone's resume look like? Right. And yet that's still the first lever that every employer looks at on whether or not to even consider talking to someone. And I just find that infuriating in today's world when they're all written by AI anyways. Like, why are we still looking at resumes? It's ridiculous. Anyway, it's soapbox.
Well, I've people who've worked with me, HR executives that have worked with me know that my my view of resumes historically has been they're more about culling than they are about finding.
Yeah, that's true.
And so referrals are still the best way to operate because again, you have a sense of you've already kind of know the culture. It comes back to culture a lot. The reason referrals are so important is there's been some pre-work typically done between the organization and the potential candidate. But I think the idea that a resume, I've seen people who have fabulous resumes and it wasn't a good fit. I've seen people that interview extremely well and it wasn't a good fit. And then there are diamonds in the rough that you've got to pull it out of. Yeah. You get a resume. It may be light, but if you ask those other questions and understand that person, where they are on their journey, how their experiences apply to the front windshield, not the rear view mirror, I'm 100% in agreement with you about the role resumes have played and will play, and especially when AI can make all of us look like we should be president.
Right. I love that insight, man. We're winding down on time, so let me give you an opportunity to do a shameless plug, and maybe it's advisors and placement. But what do you want to tell the audience about, and how can they find out more information about that?
Advisors and placement is, I think, it's the most concierge and high touch effort in senior housing placement. And a lot of what we do is we focus on the healthcare professional that's a case manager, discharge planner. Somebody's got to worry about, hey, Medicare's done with this rehab and we've got to get you moving on. And how do we do that in a way and understand those folks need love and care as well as the family that's going through sometimes an often traumatic, often challenging moment in time. And then also the healthcare provider that's looking to make that next residence, maybe the last earthly home for those people, the ideal optimal fit. So it's an exciting opportunity for us to help in Austin and Dallas. We're in Phoenix and LA. Wow. But advisors in placement, just come to our website, Joe Womack, 214-223-9907.
Bold move.
Yeah, we would love to help whoever we can, wherever. And that's what we find, Jason, when you get to be my age and you look at what a lot of my friends have been through, haven't been blessed with this kind of health, came from a farm family, my 87-year-old mom's still working. But when you look at where we've been, I never know if tomorrow somebody needs that kind of help, and it makes a huge difference in their life.
Yeah. So good, man. Thanks so much for sharing that. We're going to end with our quick fire, as we always do. This is a this or that. So I'll say this or that, and you tell me which one you prefer, what comes to mind. All right?
Amen.
All right. Let's see. Barbecue or Tex-Mex?
Tex-Mex.
Okay. Football or baseball?
Football.
New York style or Italian style pizza?
Italian style.
Country or city?
Country.
All right. And then this last one is because he's wearing a cowboy shirt in case you're listening and not watching. Troy Aikman's not an option. I'm gonna ask Tony Romo or Dak Prescott?
Roger Staubach.
No, Aikman's not an option. Staubach's not an option. All right. Well,
Tony Romo all day long.
All right, Joe, thank you so much. This has been Joe Womack of Advisors and Placement. Look them up. This has been a great conversation, Joe. Appreciate all of the insights. And you've been listening or watching the Work Culture podcast, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.